If I can tell you exactly as a machine how I got to the answer, you're going to interpret that differently than something that tells you an answer and says, well, wait a second. Now, what do I need to account for in order to say, is that true or not? Is it 50% true? Is it 80% true? I have no idea because I don't know how it got to the answer. But if the machine can actually tell you how it got to the answer, then all of a sudden that becomes interesting.
Welcome to the Inside Forbes Councils podcast. Each episode shares transformative insights and advice from members of Forbes Councils, a group of invitation-only communities for successful executives and entrepreneurs. This is Inside Forbes Councils.
Hi everyone, this is Stephen Ganoza. Welcome to Inside Forbes Councils. Today we have my interview with Terence Mills, CEO of AI.io. AI.io is developing AI that can help manage bias, safe interruptibility, and cognition at scale, and allows for extreme personalization and ultimately leads to a better customer experience, better decision-making, and increased revenue growth. Terence discussed the value of designing an AI that turns out not only a result, but an explanation of the process by which it came to that result. It's something he calls white box AI. All right, so Terence, to start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about AI.io and the work that you do?
Well, this is actually a very exciting business. We're a data science and engineering company. That's what we've been since I founded the business. And our purpose is to develop solutions around business problems. So based on what I've just said is a fundamental difference than a lot of what's been going on in this industry over the past, call it 24, 36 months, is that there was this fury that everyone got into the AI business all of a sudden. And as a result of doing that, what they started doing was building a solution and then going and looking for a problem. And that's not what we do. We've always been our feet flat, planted on the ground, looking at problems and then building solutions based on those problems. Because then you can point to metrics, right? You can point to, hey, I can affect this. I can change these metrics and I can change them either for better or for worse. You don't know. A lot of AI has to do with experimentation. So based on that, that's been what we've been focused on, but we've been focused on it just in three primary verticals. One is healthcare, the other is travel, and the third is entertainment. And we focus there primarily because put all that together, that's a huge segment of GDP in this country and actually globally. So based on that, that's where we've been focusing. So as an example, we built Priceline's intelligent chatbot. It was the first chatbot capable of booking travel, airfare, and hotel via voice. And we integrated virtual payments with that. It's really an unbelievable platform. That was one piece of it. But our business model also, bears mentioning. We really don't focus on AI as the profit model and the profit center. Yeah, we're a gun for hire for stuff, but we like to invest in our clients and we like to invest in our solutions. We've done that on an often basis. So in the case of Priceline, they didn't know what the metrics might be or the results might be from this. So they said, well, you go do it. And so we said, okay, we will. We'll go ahead and do it. And we converted their entire back end into voice. We own the IP. And the business model, though, was, hey, we need a wholesale arrangement in order to buy travel from you so that we could actually put this technology forward, make it easy for consumers to use it, but that we could get compensated on the other side. And that's exactly what happened. So we're actually under a reseller agreement that allows us to actually purchase the travel at point of sale without warehousing it, and then sell it at reseller's price. So that kind of worked, but then COVID came and you're like, it's one of those things, but that's what we do. So we're focused on our clients. We're focused on their work. We're focused on making a difference And that difference primarily comes with what we build. So we build something called white box AI, which is explainable and accountable AI. That is very, very hard to do. Not only do it well. And that's been our fundamental focus.
So what does that mean, explainable and accountable?
So there's black box AI and white box AI. Black box AI are tools of AI that can be employed, and that you can utilize those tools more or less as a platform in order to get some particular results, whether that's machine learning platform or any tools that'll help you do that. So IBM has a bunch of tools, Google has a bunch of tools. Big platform companies utilize different tools in AI where companies, solutions providers can go out and get some results. But generalized black box results are kind of interesting, but they don't really simulate an accountable environment. So here's an example. So if I work for you and you're my boss, and I come in and I say to you, hey, Stephen, I want to buy this company for $50 million. Well, you're going to sit me down and say, whoa, wait a second. Let's hear this story. Tell me what your numbers look like. How did you arrive at this conclusion? How can we make money doing this? Why is this something that is, let's just say, something worth doing, period? I have to be accountable to you. I have to give you some real answers, or you're not going to agree. Never mind budget the money to do it. If that's the business that you're in, you're never going to agree unless I come to you with a real business case. That's what AI has to do. So in other words, just because the machine said it's true, do you automatically say, okay, it must be true? You can't. It needs to also answer the same questions that I would have to answer you. And that is, this is why the answer I'm giving you makes sense. This is how I got to it. And here's how it can be interpreted. But the can be interpreted part is the funky part, because that's where people lend their bias into the stuff that these people that they program. And so that's why you hear bias in AI is people assume that, well, the answer that it's giving you is driven by the engineer and the data scientists that actually train the AI. There's a whole lot of validity in that statement.
Right. So in a black box environment, there are inputs, it gives you an output, doesn't really say why.
Right.
And in your white box AI, it might still give you an output, but it'll explain why. So you could possibly draw a different output from the same reasoning that it's giving.
Yeah, that's correct.
More or less, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I can tell you exactly as a machine, I can tell you exactly how I got to the answer, you're going to interpret that differently than something that tells you an answer and says, well, wait a second. Now what do I need to account for in order to say, is that true or not? Is it 50% true? Is it 80% true? I have no idea because I don't know how it got to the answer. But if the machine can actually tell you how it got to the answer, then all of a sudden that becomes interesting. We've got several examples of that.
Yeah, I'm wondering, how often do you disagree with the machine's conclusion?
Well, that's what everyone's trying to figure out. So, I mean, insurance companies have already gotten into hot water with this stuff. I mean, there are plenty of cases where the insurance company has rated policies, insurance policies of different kind, death benefits. It didn't make a difference, and they did it based on algorithms in AI, and based on those algorithms, they went out and they rated a policy, and then someone dies, and then they go to court about whether or not they should go ahead and pay that claim because they contested it, and someone gets up there on the stand and says, why did you decide not to pay that claim? You're now getting sued, and the person says, because the machine told me to do it.
Okay.
And at that point, the judge looks at them and says, really? Okay, you can step down now.
Yeah.
Case dismissed. And so, this happens. You could, in that example, albeit it's happening a lot now in that example. It's a real example where someone can say, yeah, we need to know the reasons for this stuff, and we need to know that it can be accountable. And that's especially true in healthcare, in finance, in any regulated industry. You better know where the answer came from, because you're going to have to account for it. Right? And you can't say, hey, the machine told me to do it. So
Yeah, I mean, in healthcare especially, healthcare can be so nuanced too in terms of like the particular care that a particular person needs. Like, do you think we'll have AI eventually replacing doctors, or is it more like this?
yeah.
It'll offer up suggestions or like probabilities, or how do you see that looking?
Well, there's so many applications in healthcare. Healthcare is an ocean, and solutions providers like us can spend a lifetime just concentrating on one thing, like radiology readings. If that's what you do, you can spend your entire career doing that. It is true that you have AI, which can apply in so many different fields on the front end, the back end of healthcare, like clinical trials is a big one. We said radiology readings. We said predicting diseases. And can a machine, for instance, predict a disease more accurately than humans can? It's a question mark. Probably yes. We've seen some indications of that, certainly as we move forward with healthcare. But ultimately, when the machine starts predicting an actual treatment, I think that's when you start getting into a very, very sticky area. And so the answer to your question is, there'll always be a human in the loop. There'll always be a doctor in the loop, because if a machine prescribes something in terms of treatment, pharmaceutical or anything else, and the patient dies, then who's accountable? And it's probably the person that built the machine, actually. We've been into these types of examples quite a bit. But in healthcare, the human in the loop is almost a requirement, both on the front end, the back end, back office, doesn't make a difference. Humans in the loop will help train AI on an ongoing basis, and they will never be replaced by machines. It's really it's as close to a rumor as an old wives' tale as that you can get. It said, here come the machines, they're going to replace everybody's job. No, that's not going to happen. Robots are largely dumb interfaces, if you know how all that works. And Alexa is not storing information up in the cloud about our conversations with her. And, this is just not how this stuff works. But you know how these stories go, and they just go crazy. But we're not seeing any indications of that in healthcare. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. And in a lot of cases where AI is being put in to solve problems, that humans are being retrained, they're being rehumanized to add value back into the process of healthcare, at least in that industry. And that's what needs to be happening, because we are, as consumers, got lost in the conversation at some point. And if that conversation can be turned back to us, I think that's a very healthy thing.
So on that note about the idea of a robot doing surgery like completely autonomously, or diagnosing completely autonomously, maybe that's still sci-fi. What are some examples of the way AI is being implemented in healthcare today?
Yeah, well, the future of healthcare is coming a little bit quicker than people had anticipated it would. And that means that the consumer, us, like we discussed a moment ago, will become part of the conversation again. And how are we doing that? Well, data, which is a tool of AI, by the way, is being used in a variety of different ways in healthcare, and you're starting to see it. So a lot of us wear these smartwatches, and they're outputting data, and that data is being shared at our will, because we're allowing that to happen, is being shared so that data can then be modeled in order to try and figure out if that's a predictor of heart disease or a predictor of the fact that you need to exercise more, whatever the case may be. That's all happening extremely well. So big data is a very big tool of AI that is working out well. There are other large segments of the space that are very interesting. So for instance, we're operating right now in an area of healthcare called revenue cycle management. So that's back office. And in revenue cycle management is the coding process. So every diagnosis, every pharmaceutical, every treatment that is received during a stay at a hospital, an inpatient or an outpatient facility, whatever's happened, gets coded. The factors of coding accurately are a big problem. They've been a problem for 70 years because it's both a math problem and a language problem. And as an example, there's one claim form in healthcare that has 84 recognizable locations on it. If you wanted to find out whether or not it was coded properly, it's 6.1 billion different combinations on one form. Humans have never been able to do that well. So the revenue cycle management companies exist and throw bodies and consultants and proprietary software at this stuff, but the problem doesn't get solved. Claims are still being denied at a large rate. Last year, 9%. 262 billion claims initially got denied, $1 billion in claims. That's an outrageous number. And it's not getting any better. So the ability to actually build something that can code those claims and can figure out the different combinations to execute on getting claims done properly and coded properly is a focus of ours. Being able to then rate them internally in terms of a chance of denial is also a valuable resource. And then if we can rate them, why not just buy them and solve the AR problem for medical facilities, all medical facilities. We like that approach. We like that business. That's something that we're operating in today. And that's an example where AI is solving 3 business problems: faulty coding, which leads to claims denials, which leads to long AR days. And it is syncing providers, every provider in this country, just about those 3 problems. You can solve those 3 problems, you're addressing a $3 to $4 trillion market that has not been addressed, that can be fixed.
Let's say AI comes in and streamlines that, makes it efficient. I imagine that helps the providers, because now they don't have to hire people to reconcile this stuff. But does it also help the consumer?
So that's the interesting question. See, there are about 50,000 problems in healthcare. And unfortunately, in order to drive solutions for these problems, you have to knock them off one by one by one. Look, the government has tried to solve globally these problems to no success, by the way. And you realize that if you can start with the biggest and boldest problems, the ones that I just gave you are largely the most significant that exist, at least in that part of revenue cycle finance. Based on that, if you can solve those 3 problems, then you can move to something else. So in theory, that if you can get bills paid sooner, that you can get rates of denials analyzed, that you can get coding done reliably, then yes, it expands to the payers, which are the insurance companies. And then the insurance companies allow it to expand to the consumer so that we can start telling the consumer all sorts of things. This is how much it's going to cost before you get your arm fixed. You're going to get your insurance adjudicated in an hour, not in 1 year. You're going to get an itemized bill. Oh, wow, really? Okay, that'll be interesting. You're going to be able to communicate with a doctor on a one-on-one basis, and they're actually going to pay attention to you instead of having their head and fingers all in a keyboard. That's what I mean by the patient becoming part of the discussion. And all of that, by the way, is the description of tools of AI coming together in intelligent systems of engagement that can solve problems. But we've got to start somewhere. So we're starting with 3 problems. Maybe they don't sound so sexy, but they are absolutely the largest in terms of unaddressed market.
Right. So we won't have robot doctors tomorrow, but we might have price transparency and better cost management and more efficiencies. and the ability to bring the consumer back into their own healthcare.
I think that that's right, and you'll have robots assisting doctors. That'll happen.
Yeah.
But replacing the doctors, likely unlikely.
Unlikely. All right, great. All right, Terence, how can people find out more about you or AI.io?
Yeah, so you can visit our website. We're at ai-io.io. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it exists. And you go check out some case studies there and the work that we do. I also write for Forbes, so I write on this topic of AI. I contribute usually once a month to that effort because it's my way of helping to educate and maybe unsow some of the confusion that has been sowed into this industry. And in addition, I run around the world like it's an inch away when it's not COVID, and do keynotes on areas where I think I can give back there as well in terms of information. So all the information is readily available online, but if you miss it, I'm commonly in the industry trying to educate the best that I can.
Great. Terence, thank you so much. This was a great discussion, and thank you for your time today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. If you'd like to hear more about AI applications,
COVID-19 has obviously disrupted the supply chains in very profound ways, exposed just about every weak link that exists in supply chains and the risks that are inherent in supply chains, but most importantly, highlighted the need to accelerate the change and the reimagination that needs to happen and the redesign that needs to happen in supply chains.
if you haven't already, check out episode 66, where Forbes Technology Council member and CEO of Llamasoft, Razak Gaurav, discusses how AI can help companies pivot and optimize their supply chains, especially during challenging times such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, that's all we have for today. As always, thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This has been Inside Forbes Councils. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a member of the Forbes Councils and would like to participate in our podcast series, please email your member concierge. If you're interested in joining a Forbes Council, learn more at forbescouncils.com.